Hey everyone, welcome. Give us just a minute. We're going to get started shortly as we do some tech setup in the background. We are already at almost 100 people in the room. That is quick, and looks like we've got a lot of interest tonight. So that is fantastic. We'll start in just a minute. Give us just a minute here. We will get started in a second here. All right. Welcome everyone to the Arlington Committee of 100. Our program for this evening is Managing Bambi. Can Arlingtonians live in harmony with our four-legged neighbors? My name is Hannah Dannenfelser. I'm the chair of the Arlington Committee of 100. Our name is very appropriate tonight because we are hovering just around 100 people. That number is going up, but so far we're at about 100. So I like that kickoff. I'm going to be your moderator for this evening. If you're watching us on Facebook Live and you think this is something your friends would like to hear, I would encourage you to share this Facebook Live to your page. If you want to stay in touch with us after today, please like and follow our Facebook page. We publish our events through email announcements as well as Facebook events, and we'd love to have you continue to join us. I also want to welcome Libby Garvey, who is on our county board. Thank you, Libby, for being here tonight. We always appreciate your support. If any of other elected officials have joined in and we haven't had a chance to spot you yet, please shoot a little note in that Q&A box, and I would like to thank you for being here. To everyone, please go ahead and mark your calendars for our next program on Wednesday, March 9th at 7 p.m. We are going to be covering the Clarendon Sector Plan. The fun title is To Come, but we'll cover the Clarendon Sector Plan, and that should be very interesting. A couple months ago, we put in a request to our viewers to ask if there were timely community issues that you wanted to discuss. We can wait on that slide, Scott. We had a handful of suggestions from you all, including one about deer population control in Arlington. And I'm going to admit that when we reviewed the survey results, the conversation actually started with me saying something to the effect of deer population control. That does not sound up our alley. After 30 minutes of vigorous program committee discussion around all the community conversations, the complexity of the issue, the varied potential solutions, I ate my words. The more I learn and discuss the issue of deer population in Arlington, the more I've realized that this is hot button, that there are a lot of perspectives, and it has a big community impact. It's the perfect topic of conversation for the Arlington Committee of 100. So before we begin, I want to give a special thank you to Michael Raisin. I hope I said your last name right. Apologies if not, for the topic suggestion. We are excited for a great program and really appreciate you suggesting it. To all of you in the audience who have a suggestion for a topic you'd like to hear, please send them our way. Our program committee works hard to keep our ear to the grindstone in the community to pick topics of relevance and interest, but your insights are especially valuable in informing the content we develop and the speakers that we invite. We're in conversation now within our board and program committee about how we make sure to continue to be listening to our viewers and be responsive to what you're looking for, and of course, relevant to the whole community. Any time of year, you're welcome to shoot us a message through our website with your input, and we would be happy to hear it, and I can always share that with our board and program committee. If you are a lover of local community issues in Arlington, if you are an eager learner and a passionate civic citizen, you have definitely come to the right place. Scott, if you can go ahead with the slide there. Our organization has a small but not insignificant operating costs that allow us to keep going and continue our work. If you would be willing to make a donation to sustain programs like this one tonight, we would be incredibly grateful. If you check that chat box, there is a link to donate there, and you will be counted as a member of the Arlington Committee of 100. We also accept checks for donations and welcome those as well. Our PO box is listed on the screen. A very big thank you tonight also goes out to Jeannie Broyhill and John Weistat, who coordinated the event. With Jeannie and John as a tag team, I'm confident that we're going to have a really great program. I'm also very personally appreciative for all of the diligent support they gave me to prepare for tonight. Not that it's certainly fun to sit up here in this seat and think I'm the star of the show, but the real work of the Committee of 100 is coming from our all-star lineup of board and program committee members. I just have a few more months as chair before you all get to trade me out, and I've just really been enjoying being part of a smart, passionate, and so highly engaged group of community leaders who engage in vigorous discussion together. We do that within our own groups as we all work to support our community in learning about important issues. So big thank you to all of our board members. All right, so I'm going to start getting to the program here. We are going to have a Q&A following the program with the audience. So please use that Zoom Q&A box. I do want to remind our audience that if your question is concise and to the point, I will be more likely to ask it. We do have a high volume of questions, and we do our best to get to as many as we can. I only choose the questions that are in the form of a question, and we do not get to the rhetorical questions. I just want to share that to encourage you to be armed to be able to put in questions that we are more likely to be able to get to. All right, I have talked. Now I really want to kick it off to our panelists who are here with us tonight. We have Alonzo Abogatis, we have Jennifer Souls, Jennifer Toussaint, and Steve Young. They're going to be speaking to us about the various perspectives around managing Bambi here in Arlington. Alonzo and Jennifer are with the county. Alonzo is the Natural Resources Manager for Arlington County Parks, and Jennifer Souls is the Acting Deputy Division Chief and Natural Resources Specialist with the Arlington County Department of Parks and Recreation. We're going to start with them. We're going to be followed by Jennifer Toussaint and then go to Steve Young. So Jennifer Souls and Alonzo, if you guys would like to go ahead and turn on your cameras, I'm just going to briefly introduce them. They are going to be co-presenting on behalf of their departments. Jennifer coordinates the invasive plants program in her role as well, and she has been with the county for over 15 years. She was formerly a naturalist leading environmental education programs in Arlington's Nature Center, and her educational background is in environmental science and has her degree from University of Virginia. Alonzo, as I said, the Natural Resources Manager for Arlington County Parks. He's been with the county for over 30 years, beginning as a park naturalist, then the acting director of the Long Branch Nature Center. If you've been there before, it is a great spot. He's active in the environmental community and has taken on leadership roles in several organizations. He started 2 Master Naturalist chapters and currently has a large following on social media as the Capital Naturalist. So consider following him if you are really excited and engaged tonight. All right, I'm going to go ahead and kick it off to you, Alonzo and Jennifer. You've got 10 minutes. We are excited to hear from you. Jennifer, reminder to unmute when you're ready to speak.
Thank you. We're excited to be here. You've already introduced us, so we will just skip that step in the interest of time. So next slide, please. Alonzo, take it away.
All right, so a little bit of background on white-tailed deer. So again, we realize white-tailed deer are an important and a necessary aspect of wildlife, and they do have important wildlife functions when they're in balance with the surrounding habitat. So deer actually almost disappeared from Virginia by 1930, but there now may be more deer than any other time in history, with population estimates of between 850,000 to 1 million deer currently, according to Virginia Department of Wildlife Resources. Now, through the 1940s and 1980s, with restocking efforts and laws protecting deer and favorable habitat, deer have rebounded at exponential rate. So just a couple of things there. Deer actually do prefer edge type habitats, so they're actually prefer to be in places in our neighborhoods and so forth, which are right near parks and so forth. And as far as rebounding at a exponential rate, after the first year, deers usually have 2 fawns, and they'll do that for the next 7 to 10 years on average, as long as nothing has ruined the type of habitat. The other big thing is that there are no real predators for deer other than man and car accidents, which luckily we don't have a lot of. to keep them in check. We don't have bears, we don't have mountain lions. Even if we had a bear coming through, they don't really don't do much. We don't have wolves. Coyotes have been shown to be ineffective at controlling or managing any kind of deer, simply because even in the north, where deer herd up in deep snows, they really don't catch many. They occasionally catch a fawn, and they scavenge most of the rest from roadkill, but they're ineffective at all of that. And then other things like foxes and bobcats really don't feed on them. So for all those reasons, deer have done very, very well around the city types of habitat. Next slide, please. So some potential impacts regarding deer overpopulation. And again, these are just potential types of things that many jurisdictions, look at. And one of those is deer vehicle collisions. Now, we're lucky here because of the slow speeds that we have and so forth. We do not have any real fatalities or anything like that. So except to your pocketbook or things like that, we don't have to worry as much about that. And that's an encouraging thing, but something to be aware of. There's also damage to landscape areas, community gardens, flower beds, and again, that is something that people do worry about. And there are effective ways of trying to deal with that. We do encourage planting of native plants, so things like deer-resistant plants also are resistant to other types of wildlife. So we don't recommend that sort of thing, but we do realize that for those that can, 8-foot-high fences, sprays to discourage them, sprinklers, all of these can help to discourage deer, and that's important. There are other ways of dealing with what you can. Another concern is tick-borne illnesses, and again, we're kind of lucky that at least the more famous one, as far as Lyme disease, we don't have a lot of blackleg, what some people call deer ticks, in Arlington, and that's very good because that's really where Lyme comes from. The most common tick, though, is Lone Star ticks, and again, I don't know numbers or anything like that, but luckily, the things that they carry, such as alpha gal, which is a red meat allergy, southern tick-associated rash illness, ehrlichiosis, these kinds of things are something that, yes, we should be aware of, but no reason to think that that it's strictly just associated with deer. Just controlling deer does not mean that these other types of things will go away. Deer are just one more factor. And then there is lately in the news is the thing about them being COVID reservoirs. And just so you know, even though USDA and so forth have over a dozen different states that they're looking at these kinds of things, in reality, most of these are in farm bred in farms and so forth. So we don't know about this. It is true that people probably gave it to deer. And since deer don't practice social distances and don't wear masks, and because they like to nuzzle each other and things like that, they do spread it amongst each other. But again, we don't know if that's going to be something that we pass back to people. So even though we do worry about it, because they could be a reservoir, this disease has mutated in the past, it is not something for us to be overly concerned about right now. Just to be realized that it is something that people are looking at. On the next slide, please. The thing that I really, and it is more of an issue to something like me, are any types of problems with overpopulated deer and as far as what they do with the ecology. Being a natural resources manager, this is something very important to me. We are stewards of the environment. And since most of the deer are concentrated in the 1.6 natural lands we have left, it's only important to realize that they do have effects that we need to be aware of. Deer, do consume 5 to 8% of their body weight each day. That's 5 to 8 pounds or so, and that can add up to a ton or so of native plants a year. So we have to realize that they do have some effect on the ecology. We also have to realize that the county, like many jurisdictions, are already doing other things. We're already controlling invasive. We have a very robust invasive plant control program, of which Jen is in charge of. Jen Souls is in charge of. I mean, we are looking at assessing trails. We're doing all of these kinds of things to realize what we can to minimize human caused impact on this. We also have a native plant preferred planting policy. So we plant native plants knowing that they support insects. We want lots of insects. Why? Because of course that feeds 96% of land birds and feeds all of our local bats. And so that's part of a good, healthy environment. But we have to also realize a couple other things. So deer numbers above the biological carrying capacity can affect the ecology of natural lands. It's just one factor. Forests do not regenerate. Native plants supporting other wildlife may suffer. Insects and ground nesting birds may decline. Invasives can spread and prosper. Erosion and compaction may also increase when deer numbers are above what the land can support. And unhealthy populations not only affect wildlife and people, but the deer themselves, including make it easier for diseases such as COVID and other types of diseases to get from one deer to another. So just a couple of quick things as the pictures to the right, some examples of some of the things that we notice in parks and so forth. All of these pictures are local except for the top left. And again, on the right, you can see the typical way that any wildlife person can tell the stripping away of what deer do to some of our plants. These are things that we use, for example, in our restoration efforts. And it's typical that along with the deer rubbing that bucks do and so forth during the rut. So again, these are things that we are aware of that deer may affect. And so we just want to make sure that we're aware that these are issues that we should be at least aware of. And on to the next slide.
Thanks. I'm going to take over here and then we'll pass back to Alonzo for the end. So in response to, citizen concerns, commission concerns, our observations in the field, and our natural resource conservation area management plans, we thought we needed to take a look and not just, we think there are deer, but how many deer are there really? We did not have a population estimate, and that's the first step as a county to begin approaching this issue. So we identified drone surveys as the most effective and accurate way of doing this. And one of the great things about it, we were able to get a survey of the entire county, except for some federal lands like the Pentagon, GW Parkway, areas like the National Airport. We contacted a company called Stewart Green, and they went through the permitting process with a number of other agencies in order to fly drones in Arlington, because normally we are a no drone zone. So next slide, please. So this was a pretty, interesting for me as an individual, experience to be part of. They scouted the county before they divided the county up into 11 areas, basically the main roads and highways. And for each area, they determined launch sites. We worked with the police department on this. We had a member of the police department with us the entire time the drones were flying. And having them flown, in the field, they were looking at the results as they were getting them, which was so they could circle back around if they needed to do another check on a particular spot. And we did, like I said, we were unable to get approval to fly over federal lands, so we did not survey those. Next slide, please. So this was a great way to do it. Like I said, we were able to just get in before the trees leafed out in April. We were really pushing it, but we managed to squeak this in before leaf out. The flights were usually in the morning, early morning or late afternoon, because in the middle of the day, we sometimes had other heat spots interfere or glare or something like that. But occasionally on cloudy days, you're able to fly throughout the entire day. And we flew each area systematically. The top picture, 5 deer at Minor Hill, if you look, you could see that those are, they come out different than the pedestrians and dog in the bottom picture. And we found those 5 deer again the second day when we restarted, and they had moved about to a couple hundred feet. So we didn't count them twice. We were like, oh, these are the same deer. And anything we weren't entirely sure of was not counted. So next slide, please. So the results of our survey, and if you want to get all this information, it is on the county website as a multiple page document with information in more detail on every area. But overall, we found a little bit of the time check. Minimum. Okay, thanks. We had a minimum of 290 deer. 4 sections showed more than 20 animals per square mile, which concerned us because for many experts, that's higher than what allows plant regeneration. Next slide, please. I'll just skip. So just to get a sense of this, we found the highest number of deer in the Glen Carlin area, almost 40 deer per square mile. Next highest was Military Road, about 33. And then some areas like Crystal City had no deer at all, or, Ballston area had very few. And next slide, please. And that's our last slide. Over to Alonzo.
Yeah. And again, we shared these different results with different commissions and stakeholders. You can find out more on the county website. We are now looking at hiring a consultant to conduct a deer management assessment. That assessment will interpret the completed survey and gather additional data. It'll include public engagement and benchmarking. It'll determine if and where deer management strategies should be implemented, and if necessary, explore options to develop and implement a plan. Then these will be presented, these findings and options, to environmental commissions, up to county leadership, general public, and deciding on what, if any, options Arlington County will take. So last slide. We will, of course, take questions at the end, but that concludes our presentation. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jennifer and Alonzo. That was very, very helpful and informative. I am going to go ahead and pass it off to our next. I'm realizing at the beginning when I was listing our panelists, I think I might have misspoke. So I'm going to apologize for that. Our second presentation is going to be Steve Young. Jennifer Toussaint is going to be our third presentation. Steve Young is a 40-year Glen Carlin resident, and he is a retired EPA employee. So Glen Carlin has some real expertise in that civic association. He's a certified master naturalist with the Arlington Regional Master Naturalists Group. That's a mouthful, Steve. Sorry about that. I tried not to fumble there. Working as a county volunteer, he spot non-native invasive plants for well over 20 years, primarily in the Long Branch Nature Center and in Glen Carlin Park. His really great work to restore the forest health work was recognized with Arlington's 2012 Bill Thomas Park Volunteer Award. So Steve, we're really happy to have you here tonight, and I will go ahead and kick it off to you.
All right, thanks, Hannah. And I will try to not repeat a whole bunch of stuff that we just heard from Alonzo and Jen. Just a couple more things. We say ARMAN for short, for Arlington Regional Master Naturalists. And
Very
ARMAN, ARMAN works with county park officials in 21 of our parks, National Park Service officials, Nova Parks, and we do a lot of volunteer work, removing invasive plants, doing restoration plannings, and monitoring our natural resources. So yeah, I've been in Glen Carlin for a long time, and I've had the opportunity to study the changes both in the Glen Carlin neighborhood and in the park. And as Alonzo just mentioned, Glen Carlin was the epicenter, according to the recent survey, of deer concentration. So yeah, and I'll be speaking to that. Just a quick, if you look at the map here, it highlights how the park areas are a very small piece of Arlington. And I think Alonzo alluded to this. Areas that are considered to be natural areas in Arlington are only something on the order of 720 acres, not a whole lot more than 1 square mile. So the natural areas are really just a tiny but precious piece of our resources here in the county. And there we go. We feel that the deer abundance has been increasing, especially I would say over the last 5 to 10 years, my personal observation. And here we're just sort of showing you deer at large, not in the natural areas, but in developed areas. And this is a phenomenon that we didn't see a whole lot of, let's say 10 years ago. Yes, one would occasionally see a deer, but they were kind of rare and exciting to see. And there's been a real change, especially in the last 5 years, I would say, to the point where we now see herds of deer parading through the neighborhoods. Now, why is that happening? I think that there are two main drivers. One is that there literally are more deer, but perhaps more importantly than just the numbers, the deer are running out of food in the natural areas. And if you ran out of food in your immediate area, you'd go looking for food elsewhere. Well, we're seeing the deer looking for food in our developed areas, and they're having quite an impact that I think a lot of the audience may have experienced firsthand. If you grow a vegetable garden, you may have lost a lot of vegetables to hungry deer, your landscape plantings. So there's a real impact on us in addition to our natural resources, but we're seeing the impact on us because they've already impacted our natural resources so heavily. And here are just a few pictures. One of the things that breaks our heart is we're trying so hard to plant new trees in the county. And among other things, it's part of our stormwater management efforts. And we're finding that the deer move in and clobber those new tree plantings. Alonzo mentioned antler rub. The picture on the right shows a tree sapling that was planted by the county, and the buck rubbing the velvet off his newly grown annual antlers, severely damaged. That's probably fatal damage. It's certainly severe damage to that tree that had been planted. And we're finding that we have to put up expensive tree cages to try to protect the trees. And even then, it's a pretty iffy proposition. We've really covered much of this territory already, but I do want to mention, we do use a term, carrying capacity. That is a term that reflects a tremendous amount of ecological scientific research. And it's kind of a pretty simple concept that a given amount of resource can only support so much of a consumer. So deer are very large animals that eat 5 to 7 or more pounds of vegetation per day. And because they're so large, they have a disproportionate impact on our natural areas as well as other areas. So the survey that was discussed did recommend deer management with particular attention to our sensitive natural areas. This is a picture in my stomping ground, Long Branch Nature Center. And I realize, if you're not used to it, this might look, well, that's a nice open forest. That forest is looking very open because that ground zero, that deer concentration, is eating everything it can reach within this woodland. So they're causing tremendous damage to the young trees, and especially to our spring wildflowers, our native plants that are just fantastic, really cool resources. The hungry deer in the spring are gobbling up those plants, which is sad to see. Now, Lacey Woods is an isolated pocket. I'm sure some of you know it. It's harder for deer to get to Lacey Woods. And so there's less deer impact in Lacey Woods Park. And hopefully you can kind of picture how there's a lot more understory. These pictures were taken on the same day, by the way. This denser understory is much more wildlife friendly for things like box turtles, birds, and some birds actually nest on the ground. Other birds nest in low-lying shrubby areas. So contrast in deer impact. And we're talking about a lot of nice native natural resources that are being impacted by this deer overabundance. And the box turtle is kind of a poster child. They rely heavily on mayapples as a food source in this spring. And the deer are gobbling up those mayapples now. It's probably not their favorite food. Another thing on the right, this strawberry bush, a beautiful native plant. It's been called deer candy. It is so popular with the deer. And we're losing our strawberry bush. We had possibly the best growth of it in the county at Long Branch Nature Center. It's being severely damaged, and I'm afraid we may lose it at the rate things are going. We believe that the high numbers of deer, that they are suffering, that there is malnutrition. And I think Alonzo briefly mentioned, but chronic wasting disease is moving toward us from the west. It's getting closer and closer, and it's a real concern. Alonzo covered that, the issue that's coming up, controversial, I think, about deer as reservoirs for COVID. Armin has been talking to a lot of people, and what we're hearing is that the public recognizes, kind of like Hannah's intro, people recognize that deer actually are an issue. We're not getting a lot of pushback. Different groups talk to different audiences. I understand that. We've had support from 4 of the commissions, and civic associations have expressed support for managing deer. Surrounding jurisdictions have active deer management programs, and you can see all of these greens. We're sort of like an island of refuge here in Arlington for the deer, and that may be a contributing factor to why we're seeing such high numbers, especially in the most recent years. Even in DC, because Rock Creek Park is National Park Service, they have an active deer management program. So takeaways, we're basically letting the deer be in charge of managing our forests under the current regime if we do nothing. And we are seeing real damage. And I think the deer are suffering. Not only are they struggling to get enough food, but deer are being hit by cars. There may not be any human fatalities, but there are a lot of deer fatalities. And I'm hoping that AWLA might be able to share some statistics about the deer carcasses that they have to collect, many of which are along roadways. And they're along roadways because they were hit by motor vehicles. Motor vehicles are the only effective predator for deers in today's environment. So we believe that humans contributed to this problem developing, and we need to intervene to restore balance to the current situation. And I'm going to wrap there. I think I'm at 10 minutes. I have a few overflow slides that I might get to later if it makes sense during the Q&A session. So thanks.
Perfect. Thanks, Steve. It was really funny as you're talking. I went back on my phone. I had to double check. I told my family that I was moderating this panel tonight, and my brother texted me that he was at Rock Creek Park today and he saw a sign that said, "Don't stay in the park after dark. Sharpshooters will be managing the deer population." So I thought of that and thought it was interesting. People are clearly talking about this all throughout the region and community. So thank you, Steve. I'm going to go ahead and pass this off to Jennifer Toussaint. We are very excited to have Jennifer with us here tonight. She is the Chief of Animal Control in Arlington County. Her Chief of Animal Control role is housed at the Animal Welfare League of Arlington, and she's part of their organization. AWLA is Arlington's nonprofit providing sheltering and control services for animals around Arlington. They are, a side note, they are a fantastic organization. They support a lot of great animals. If you are looking to adopt, they are a great option. They also work with our safety net nonprofits in the region to support families in crisis. So they have just so many wonderful things they do to support animals in our community. Jennifer joined the animal control team in early 2012. She has numerous accomplishments in her role in not only the tactics of animal control, but the growth of department outreach efforts and also policy decisions, including things like implementing a local ordinance in relation to wild and exotic animal care and ownership. She's a highly decorated community leader, including by being the 2017 recipient of the Virginia Animal Control Association, Dr. Kent Roberts Animal Control Officer of the Year, and she received a commendation for the Virginia General Assembly for her service. A few other things. I want to shout out that in 2022, she received a COVID Hero Award from the Arlington County Board, which is particularly exciting. So congratulations on that recent award. I also, shameless, if those of you who know me, I'm completely shameless. I particularly love that Jennifer is an alumni of Leadership Arlington, which I'm a big fan. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Jennifer.
Thank you, Hannah, and thank you for such a kind introduction. I appreciate being invited tonight to talk. I will also graze over some slides next time. Maybe Steve, Alonzo, Jen, and I will coordinate slides to make sure we're not repeating some of the information. So it's good to see that all of us are on the same track talking about some of the same things. I celebrate 10 years of service to the community next month, and I've been the Chief of Animal Control here in Arlington since 2016. So a little bit about AWLA. Animal Control and Sheltering Services are contracted to the nonprofit Animal Welfare League of Arlington here in Arlington County. So it is a private nonprofit shelter with a public contract. It's been serving the community since 1944. Animal Control Services have been run by AWLA since the early 1980s, I believe 84. And that is how my agency, including myself, are housed at the shelter. I welcome any questions people might have about that relationship. So here at AWLA, we understood very early on the key role we play in the community in managing and assisting with all animal-related concerns. In 2017, the board here at the shelter adopted a wildlife policy due to the ever increasing call volume for wildlife concerns in the community. Animal control officers here in Arlington County spend over 50% of their time in the year on wildlife related calls. So a huge volume of the work that we do is spent assisting the community with wildlife. We respect the environment. We have that tolerance and understanding for living beings, and taking humane approaches to resolve conflicts using non-lethal means. Some of the roles that we've expanded on in 2016, we were picked here in Arlington County as a Wild Neighbors pilot community in the United States, one of 5 across the entire country, for the groundbreaking and revolutionary work that the Animal Control Department has been doing with wildlife for decades. In 2020, AWLA finalized our Wildlife Resource Center, where we expanded our conservation efforts to ensure we were providing supplies to licensed rehabbers, increasing our training across the state and the country for animal care and control professionals, and providing a volunteer assistance to make sure injured orphan wildlife could get where they needed to be. From 2013 to 2021, AWLA assisted with the release to wild or release to rehab of 2,627 native wild animals. So to answer the question, do we do wildlife? Yes, absolutely. We are all in for all animals here in Arlington County, including our wild neighbors. Resolving wildlife conflicts, we do this every day. I've done this today multiple times. We have been doing this again since the 1980s. We keep close statistical data to ensure we meet appropriate benchmarks and to catch any new developments or patterns. One of the examples that I could give for that is we do track motor vehicle collisions. We have for many years, and we report that data to the county's Transportation Engineering Bureau to ensure that appropriate signage for deer are posted in roadways where collisions are of concern. And pointing out that wildlife is important to Arlington, and the county's engagement presentation for Forestry and Natural Resources Plan, wildlife conservation scored in the top 3 categories, and why citizens want to use our local parks. We know that the citizens here in Arlington care about wildlife. You call us every day, all day long, to assist you with native wildlife, so we know that it's front on your minds. Alonzo covered quite a bit of this. So deer are crepuscular, obviously, most active dawn and dusk. That edge habitat, we create a lot of that in our properties. Matrifocal groups are important. So even if we decrease deer in Arlington County by half, right, from 290 down to something like 120 or so, they would still be in groups. Things like chronic wasting disease or concerns about COVID transmission, not largely of concern at this point as a disease transmission point to humans, but deer are going to congregate. They're social in that way. So even if we had less deer, that wouldn't necessarily prevent the spread of chronic wastings. We've been on top of this in animal control for over 2 years now here in Arlington County. We work regularly with our state biologists, managing every kind of disease outbreak, 2 large-scale outbreaks in wildlife here in Arlington just in the last year alone, in raccoons and federal migratory birds. Their mating season, obviously rutting season, that's when collisions or concerns about deer and roadways do increase. Deer do have predators in Arlington: coyotes, foxes, high privacy fencing, construction sites, motor vehicles. Deer, once they, such large animals, once they do break a leg or multiple legs, that could be a reason for them to need to be euthanized. And like Alonzo talked about, their reintroduction. So are deer a nuisance? When these questions started coming out, I was like, well, maybe I was over-focused on raccoons and birds. Maybe I statistically missed something. And I delved right into the stats that we keep. So from November of 2020, we've had a wildlife online conflict reporting form. Since then, less than 3% of all wildlife conflicts reported in Arlington County have been deer related. Similarly, in 2021, we ran 2,733 calls for service relating to wildlife, injured, orphan, or conflict. Only 131, so just shy of 5%, were deer related overall. Again, but if we had too many deer or deer were growing in number, why are our call volumes related to deer decreasing statistically? Lyme disease is a risk to human health. Blackleg ticks, as Alonzo said, called deer ticks, are carriers of this illness. It is a multi-host disease. Over 60 species of wildlife carry blackleg ticks. Here in Arlington County, animal control, we actually see them most frequently on native wild rabbits, not the deer that we bring in. Even with deer population reduction, as low as 9 deer per square mile in a study done, deer tick numbers or blackleg tick numbers didn't decline enough to be to prevent that reproduction or that human health concern. And there are solutions, humane solutions for all of these kinds of things, tick tubes, etc., as options for use. Backyard garden concerns, we get very few of these, but like they can occur. There are ways to mitigate them. There are humane deterrents that we've recommended to individuals that have been very, very assistive here in Arlington County, and we can talk to you about that if you are having this issue. Deer motor vehicle collisions are statistically decreasing here in Arlington. Public education campaigns, we get the word out when these things are going to occur. Increased signage, always helpful. We could do better at erecting fences and visual barriers. Installing wildlife crosses or overpasses are a great thing to use if there's a specific area of concern. And there are special devices that warn deer of oncoming cars. None of those are currently installed here in Arlington. What about the understory? Deer are just one aspect of why understory decreases can occur. Insect damage, plant disease, parasitic organisms, pollutants like harsh fertilizers, invasive species, increased foot traffic like we've seen during COVID, climate and weather extremes, overdevelopment, and wildlife. There are multiple wildlife that graze that can do destruction to understory, absolutely. A recent Yale Forest School study assessed deer impact on forests, concluding that deer density within the study range was not the leading factor of tree regeneration decline. So there's a lot of science out there. Some of the science disagrees with itself. Here in Arlington, I think that we can definitely start better data tracking some of this stuff to get to the ground root cause. So what do we know? There's a lot of allegations that numbers are higher than they've been before, and that's not statistically proven. This is the first time that we've counted deer. It really does a great job at establishing a good baseline for us to make educated decisions moving forward. We also do not see an issue with deer and body weight conditioning. We don't see emaciated deer here in Arlington County. There's not necessarily a magic number that any community should have for deer populations or any wildlife population. This is an ethical conversation between biological carrying capacity and cultural carrying capacity. What do people want to see versus what can the biological environment support? And Arlington has always taken a measured, calculated, and humane approach to managing local wildlife populations. We do this every single day here in the county. Good next steps, analyzing the limited data we currently have, as Alonzo and Jen had highlighted, is really going to be the next place that we go. Collecting additional data, so measurable impacts, what are we actually statistically seeing? Creating realistic benchmarks, like what are we trying to achieve? What are we trying to protect in our green spaces? How do we measure success of implementation if we start to move forward with implementation of any version of a plan? How do we create benchmarks for that? And the creation of an action plan that utilizes a wide range of ideally non-lethal solutions for site-specific application. And that's the end for me.
Perfect. Thanks, Jennifer. You were right on time. I always appreciate that. Okay, I'm going to ask our panelists to go ahead and turn your cameras back on and unmute. We are going to get to our Q&A here. We have a ton of questions from the audience, which is awesome. We have a very engaged audience. So I am going to, there's a number of questions. I'm going to jump right into the deep end here about what are the population control methods. What are the solutions here? We have numerous questions, so I'm consolidating about 10 questions in one, and I apologize to the audience for this. Can you summarize what the options are to solve deer population concerns?
This is easier when we can all look at each other meaningfully
Yeah.
instead of like kind of playing guessing game.
It's always a little hard here. Yeah.
I think that it really depends on the situation, the park, and what any additional data confirms as being, what we need to find out exactly what would work where. And that is not something that any of us, I think, can absolutely say one way or the other, to be honest with you. I do think that would, that one of the reasons that we are trying to get someone on board with a wildlife biologist to determine what, if any, effects these have on there would be to determine if something needs to be done, and then recommend the best options that would work, that may vary by the situation.
Okay. Anyone want to add there? I think Alonzo covered it. Okay, great. Alan asked, and I heard some references to this throughout the presentations, but I don't know if we dug in on this a little bit more. Alan asked, has COVID been found in Arlington's white-tailed deer? It has been found in other places. I'm seeing head shaking now.
I'll jump on that one. Yeah, so animal control here in Arlington County does all testing of native wildlife for any disease concerns. So we were the ones to be the whistleblower for the bird mortality event in the region. We were the ones to be the whistleblower for the canine distemper outbreak in our raccoons. We're very good at assessing when wildlife is unwell and getting the appropriate clinical testing done to ensure we can move forward as a community in the safest way. And so no deer have been presented with any clinical signs or symptoms that would lead us to believe that there was a concern currently. And we would, of course, let the community know immediately if anything like that was ever confirmed here. The other thing that we'd like to highlight is we don't know how deer are getting COVID. So things like wildlife feeding is always discouraged. Not only is it illegal in the state of Virginia, but it is potentially one of the things that scientists are looking at as a cause for disease transmission. We really don't even know, though, statistically how they're getting it, but it's not here, thank goodness, at least not yet.
Great, thank you. Richard asks, has the county determined the minimum number of deer pairs required for a given area to sustain the deer population going forward? So I'm reading Richard's word for word, I'm a little bit confused by the phrasing, but I think what he's asking is about the total capacity that and correct me if any of our panelists disagree with me, I think he's asking about the total capacity of our community to sustain a deer population.
Again, that would depend basically on the habitat itself and what pressures are already on the habitat. It would differ by different habitat types. I mean, some places recommend one thing or another, but it really does require you to look much more carefully at what is already on the habitat, how much the habitat can support without impinging on other wildlife uses of the habitat as well, the regeneration of what's out there. And so there is no one number that we can determine that's the dead set number for any one location. We can look at benchmark with similar habitats, plant communities in other areas. That'll give us a clue. But I do think that, that is one of the reasons we're trying to look at a wildlife biologist led contractor to be able to decide what would be the appropriate numbers depending on that habitat. I'm sorry if I jumped on that one, but anyone else is more than happy to add whatever they like to say.
Anyone want to add? Oh, looks good, Jennifer.
Yeah,
I think that was originally misunderstanding it as the minimum number of deer, and I would say, well, 2.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna jump on that
your
too, Jen.
interpretation was probably what he meant.
Yeah.
All right. Austin asks, can you talk to the pros and cons of public hunting for population control versus active contractor and county management?
Since Alonzo keeps taking the first stab at things for all of us, I'll try on this one. So
All right, we'll mix up the order here.
yeah, so culling, the other language that's used for these large scale county projects and reducing population of anything, is not something that Arlington County has ever done before. So we have no previous benchmark as to what has or has not worked. We do know that our green spaces are very tightly interwoven into the backyards or backing to properties and private land. We also know here in Arlington County, as the current policy for downed deer, the police department and animal control have to very strategically work to safely euthanize by firearm even deer that are not capable of standing and walking around. So there's definitely some things to consider in this. I also know, as somebody who lives adjacent to a park that does have a culling project in Fairfax County, that it definitely has feelings, right, about how people want to use that green space and when they feel or don't feel safe in it. I don't think that we have a benchmark though to decide one way or the other. But I know that we also have some laws regulating or deregulating hunting in spaces as tightly packed as we are here in Arlington.
I would add that because we do have surrounding jurisdictions that do have active deer management programs, there's a lot of data available and the safety record is outstanding. There have been no reported accidents involving those programs. So the protocols are established, they appear to work. And we have been hearing from National Park Service and Fairfax County that they feel that they are seeing recovery of natural ecosystems as they reduce, they're not eliminating, they're reducing the deer numbers to more sustainable levels.
Jennifer Toussaint, I saw you unmute. Were you about to add something?
I would just add that Fairfax County has been doing that for over 25 years, right? So when we talk about these kinds of things, what is the public expectation? Going from no centralized management plan of deer whatsoever to a culling program is a very large leap as a community to take.
So I'm going to ask a question we have from Sam that is what y'all are talking about right now. He asks, what are the long-term goals? He references some of what you've already spoken about. And then what are the long-term goals of a deer management program in Arlington County? And how would we know when we've achieved those results?
So again, that would depend on, I mean, we have resource, as stewards, we're trying to reach certain resource goals. We're trying to make sure that the habitat that we have will serve well, for many, many different kinds of creatures, including deer. So it really does depend on what we're trying to do. But as far as the long-term goals, and in our limited natural areas that we have left, again, somebody mentioned numbers. I believe I think it's 248 acres is all we have left actually of natural lands that are county owned in Arlington. We have a lot of stuff that is stuffed into these one small areas. And so we want to make sure that whatever we have is something that we can maintain that will not affect other types of wildlife there. And so it would depend on that. But as far as what we're trying to do, it would be in line with our natural resource management plan and so forth, and what's been called for in previous natural resource management plans, and that we want to be good stewards and maintain a wildlife habitat that is sufficient and would be beneficial to all sorts of different kinds of wildlife that we have out there.
And I'll just tag in, as you said, the goal is to have this healthy deer population that's part of an ecological community. And, all the aspects of wildlife and ecology are there. And then the other thing, and you mentioned like assessment. Yeah, what we are thinking is that any plan would need to have like, how are we going to assess the success of this plan? Like what is the vegetation impact? Because our goal is not to like have a certain number of deer. Our goal is to have forest regeneration or to have, plants successfully reproduce, or to have, enough habitat for ground nesting birds or something like that. So, we would want to be measuring the impacts of any management plan to make sure we were achieving our stewardship goals.
I have two questions. I know we're getting a little close to our time here. If we can, I'm going to pair two questions together here that are kind of tactical. We have some folks in the audience who are wondering about what they should do. So looking for a little of advice here from folks. The first one is from Jeff, who asked, do deer deterrents work if deer are hungry enough to eat the plants? I don't quite understand the last part of his question. So he says that they did not co-evolve with, but do deer deterrents work if they're hungry enough to eat the plants? Someone also is asking, how do we notify animal control about deer problems, and what do you consider a deer problem? She's saying in her neighbor, Joseph, he's saying that in his East Falls Church neighborhood, and he hasn't seen deer problems in the last 4 years until the last 3 to 4 years, and they're now frequent visitors. So he's wondering what should he be doing?
As far as deterrents, yeah, they do work in a limited basis, but it is true. I mean, plants are deer resistant. Nothing is deer proof. So yes, you can do things, spray stuff on your plants, whatever. I strongly encourage planting again things for habitat use, because we are trying to provide habitat even in our own backyards. So again, things that are deer resistant, even if they're native, do not supply as much habitat as, for example, other types of plants. But sprays will work. For example, sprinklers, whatever, they will work to a thing. You do need to reapply them after every rain, that sort of thing. But again, it is true. You have to realize that there are such things as deer resistant types of things, but there's no real deer proof types of vegetation.
If I could jump in, and could I cheat and share my screen for just a moment?
Sure, as long as we make it quick. Yes,
yeah,
go ahead.
I understand. So
Yeah.
Let me, I think this is right. Yeah. I'm just going to hop. What I have seen in Glen Carlin is, in literally, I would say the last 3 years, neighbors are building exclosures like this to keep the deer out of their vegetable gardens. They're trying to grow vegetables, which is a wonderful thing. And they found, and it was a recent development, the deer were annihilating their vegetables. So this is not aesthetically pleasing. None of them are, but they've had to resort to this in order to grow vegetables. And I point to this as further evidence that something has changed in recent years, and that we're seeing more impact from the deer, including where people live. Thanks.
I'll just jump in last. So one of the questions was about how to reach animal control. You can go to the website www.awla.org. You click on the tab in the upper right-hand corner about wildlife, and you will see our online wildlife conflict reporting form. So when people say they have a wildlife problem, we kind of need to know what's the problem. Is the problem you're seeing wildlife? Is the problem that wildlife are being destructive in your backyard? Are they blocking roadways in your community? Are you experiencing concerns relating to Lyme disease or an illness uptick? What is the quantitatable problem? But it's an open forum. You can kind of just write as many paragraphs as you feel. You can include photos. The other thing about deterrence. So we use deterrence all the time here in Arlington County. We rent out or give out deterrents to community members for everything from coyotes to raccoons to squirrels, you name it. Deer are deterrable. With all wildlife is highly adaptable. So if you put a deer deterrent in your backyard, like a sprinkler, and you assume that that's going to work for the next 5 years, that's not going to work. So things like that need to be rotated for wildlife to still be considered a deterrent. Like Alonzo mentioned, things need to be reapplied. I would say you don't even need to go to the level of actually spraying things. We had an issue here in Arlington County with a resident who had used a certain deterrent method. And then we gave her for free to borrow some Mylar balloons to tie to a brick that blow in the wind. She has never seen a coyote in her backyard since. It's been about 1.5 years now. SpongeBob did a good job at telling that coyote to get lost. So wildlife will be habituated to your deterrence. So you're going to need multiple things. My property backs to one of the very large green spaces in Fairfax County that does have a deer management plan. My husband and I grow all of our food. We also collect rainwater, we plant natives, and I don't have caging over my gardens. We use humane deterrence. I don't need to go to the level of caging my gardens because of the humane deterrence that we use. And the parks that I back to had way more than 50 plus deer per square mile when they initially did assessments. So it's possible. Please give us a call here at Animal Control. We'd love to talk to you about solutions for your family.
All right, on that note, thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Alonzo. And thank you, Steve. I'm going to ask our audience, stick with us for just one more minute. We've got a couple wrap-up notes. Primarily, thank you again. Really grateful for y'all with your time. I know to those of you, we clearly have a lot of folks who are really interested in hearing about deer. So there's an Arl Now article. I'm going to give a shameless plug to Arl Now. They had a great article earlier today that you can read, but there's media coming out constantly to keep following. So I encourage you to stay in the loop. I also want to encourage everyone in our audience to save the date for our March program, Wednesday, March 9th at 7 p.m. We're going to be covering the Clarendon-Sexter plan, and the link is in the chat. If you want to watch the recording for tonight, like our Facebook page and view it on Facebook Live. It will be up on our website shortly. I don't guarantee how quickly we will get that up, but we will have the video up there soon if you want to watch this back and share it in your networks. We would encourage that. I am going to say, you hear me reference every once in a while, my family tunes in every month, which I am always very grateful for. And I see a little note from my mom asking for the link to donate to the Arlington Committee of 100. So Mom, thank you for that so much. I am always grateful for that question. So I'm going to go ahead and stick that link in the chat again. If you would like to, I see you raising your hand, Mom. Thanks. All right. If you would like to donate to become a member of the Arlington Committee of 100, we would welcome your support to keep this program going. Thank you all for a wonderful night. I'm sorry we went 2 minutes over, but I hope we were worth your time for the extra 2 minutes. Have a great night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Bye, y'all.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
very much.
Thank you.